Hello, and welcome to the Legal Marketing Brief, the series where we showcase attorneys from across the country. I'm John Simpson, CEO of Convert Marketing. Today, we're sitting down with Milie Joshi and Geoffrey from Pacific Wildfire Attorneys. Based in Southern California, Milie and Geoffrey are helping clients recover from the devastating fires in Southern California in early 2025. We learned some really important information, particularly for victims of the Eaton Fire. We hope you enjoy our discussion with Milie and Geoffrey from Pacific Wildfire Attorneys. Great. So we've heard so much in the news earlier this year about the wildfires in Southern California. But as I understand it, all wildfires are not the same. In fact, the Eaton and the Hearst fires are different from the Palisades fire. Can you talk through a little bit about why that is?
Really what it comes down to is fires are caused by different events or different circumstances. And both the Eaton and Hearst fires were determined to have been caused by Southern California Edison. And they're not sure about the cause of the Palisades fire at this point in time. There's been speculation that it might have been from a homeless encampment, but eventually they will determine what the cause of that fire is. And so, for instance, with the Palisades fire, if the utility is not involved, then you can't sue Mother Nature, so to speak, and you can't recover damages really from a homeless person, even if you could identify that person. So I guess in this sense, it's proverbially the deep pocket is what the utilities are. So most of the cases that are filed have been filed against utilities as being the negligent party.
So can you tell me why SoCal Edison is responsible for the Hearst and Eaton fires?
Yes, all utilities have a legal obligation to make sure that their equipment is maintained in a safe and workman-like manner. In addition, they have an obligation to make sure that the vegetation that surrounds a lot of this equipment, and it's often the power lines and the towers and those kind of things, is all properly cut back. And in fact, Southern California Edison charges its customers for that upkeep and repair. And that's also kind of a question or an issue at the heart of this. They believe that the Altadena fire, or as we call it, the Eaton fire, was caused by lines basically coming into contact with each other, causing an arc, and then dropping down into the vegetation below. And if you've got winds of 75 miles per hour, well, you know what happens after that. The fire just goes raging out of control.
So can you give me a sense of the scope of these fires? How many folks or how many households were actually impacted?
Each fire, the impact of it kind of depended on how populous the area was. So the fires that we're talking about, the Eaton fire, that was mainly in the Altadena, Pasadena area. And so we're estimating about 9,000 residences. The number of people is obviously different than the number of residences, but yeah, about 9,000 in the Altadena area. Hearst fire, on the other hand, is in a more rural, less populated area, so there's not an official count as to that right now.
Wow, if you have 9,000 or so households in just one of these fires impacted, and then figuring the average 2.2 people per household or whatever it is, this is a lot of people that have been impacted. And so can you talk through the different types of claims that are available to these folks?
There's many different types of claims that are out there, but generally the ones that are best known or the types that are going to be compensable to a fire victim would be real or personal property. There also can be businesses that are impacted, and you'd have what we'd call business interruption types of claims. To a lesser extent, probably wrongful death. There were, I think, approximately 15 or less deaths that are attributable to the Eaton fire, but oftentimes other people might have had some type of personal injury, not necessarily a burn, but they could have smoke inhalation or other effects that were from the fire. And then you have smoke and ash, soot type of claims, as well as what we call emotional distress claims. That's the result of being impacted directly by the fire. Many of these people were in what I call the zone of danger, and were forced to, and in many cases, escape with their lives. Many people sometimes had to abandon cars to get out of harm's way. In addition, on top of that, you've got a situation where if you lose the benefit or the use and enjoyment of your property, that's also an emotional distress claim that can be compensated. Emotional distress claims aren't something that's compensated by insurance. So that's a reason often why for those types of claims, you're going to need Pacific wildfire attorneys to assist you.
Milie, can you talk a little bit about the emotional distress claims?
Yeah, so emotional distress, sometimes it's got a bad stigma to it, or sometimes it's thought to be, to the layperson, it's thought to be a type of cause of action that, shouldn't be compensated. But if you think about it, emotional distress is just a fancy legal way of saying mental distress. Think about the mental health impact the fires had on everyone who was affected, having to leave their homes, having to completely change their lives, having to, sit in traffic, watching a fire come closer and closer to them, and then having to abandon all to just make sure that they're safe. So emotional distress is a claim that really shouldn't be underestimated, because mental health, as we know now, and maybe not some time ago, mental health is just as important as physical health.
What additional living expenses can wildfire victims recover?
It can really run the gamut. It can be the costs that were incurred just to find a place to live while your home wasn't safe. It could be the meals that you had to buy because you couldn't cook in your own kitchen. It could be the furniture that you had to replace because, everything in your house, it reeks of a bonfire, a deadly bonfire, but still a bonfire. It could be the cost to have to repaint or refloor or whatever it is you need to do to your home to get it to the condition it was before the fire occurred.
So let's talk about who qualifies to seek damages, and perhaps just as important, is there a deadline for when claims need to be made?
Yeah, who qualifies to seek compensation against SoCal Edison would be anybody that was impacted significantly by the fire. Most often, it's going to be anybody, obviously, that lost real or personal property in the fire, but it can also be somebody, as we were talking about, that suffered emotional or mental distress as a result of having to evacuate from the fire. Folks that have lost the use and benefit and enjoyment of their property as a result of the fire. It can be as simple as perhaps if they've suffered significant soot, ash, or smoke damages to their property, but it didn't really result in it being directly burned. So I kind of liken it to, once again, the zone of danger. Who is in the geographical zone of danger? And eventually that will be established, likely in these cases. And it's not going to be an arbitrary line, but somebody that was miles and miles away in Los Angeles County isn't going to be somebody, unless they happen to be there at the time of the fire, being able to recover from it. There is a statute of limitations to submit these, and you have to be very cognizant of that. For any type of personal injury claim, and that's an injury to your body, it's going to be a 1-year statute of limitations in order to submit that. Generally, property damage, whether it be real or personal, is 3 years. Well, I always tell clients the best thing to do here is to seek counsel early about what the nature and scope or extent of your claims would be, because you're likely to have multiple claims.
So the thing about legal claims and legal rights in this type of situation is if you don't use it, you might lose it. And if you think you might have a claim, or if you think that there is some sort of harm that you suffered that you may be entitled to recover for, contact Pacific wildfire attorneys sooner rather than later. That way you know that you're going to be taken care of no matter how long the process takes in the court.
So given the California housing market and how expensive housing is and how expensive insurance is, I have to imagine there are a lot of folks who are either underinsured or uninsured. What does it look like for them when they're seeking damages in this case?
Well, unlike the Palisades fire as of right now, here we have an actual liable party. And if someone's underinsured, let's say you have a home and it burned down, the insurance coverage to replace that home is probably going to be a fraction of what it actually costs. And there's no way to really bridge that gap unless there is a third party who's responsible. And in this situation, that's SoCal Edison. So in the underinsured situation, that's where you can make up the difference between what your insurance actually covers and what you need to become whole, what you need to get to be able to be in the position you were in before the fire occurred. And then if you're uninsured, if there wasn't this third party that was responsible, SoCal Edison, then you wouldn't have any really recourse other than what is in your own pocket. And so not having insurance is something that is not going to hurt you if you were impacted in the Hearst fire or the Eaton fire.
So speaking of that, if the house next to me burns down tomorrow, chances are it's going to be fairly straightforward to identify what it's going to cost to get them, that homeowner, back to having a house that they can live in again. But in this case, where you've got not one house, but you've got a massive amount of homes that have been burned down and destroyed, obviously the demand for not only material, but the labor that goes into rebuilding these homes in a timely manner, presumably is going to go up in cost. How is that factored into the claims process? Or is it?
It is, and what they're finding both in Palisades and Eaton fires, that not only is there a great demand for the contractors and the labor and the materials, but they're finding simply, particularly in the Eaton situation, those homes were built long ago. And in order to rebuild a home that would be the same or similar, there's just a huge differential. And many people are trying to understand how they can bridge that gap. And while we can certainly help clients with pursuing full payment or recovery from their insurance company, ultimately they're probably not going to get full repayment, and they're going to have to look to a third party such as SoCal Edison to make them whole.
This is one of the reasons insurance companies are leaving California, especially for home insurance. Every year you see different insurance companies that have stopped offering homeowners insurance in California because housing in California is so expensive. And when you do have a situation where there's a wildfire or a landslide or a flood, the replacement costs to rebuild a home of the similar condition, it's not unusual to be double the amount of your actual homeowner's coverage.
Can you talk about the process for filing a case against SoCal Edison?
What's really entailed at this point in time is to make sure that you're a proper qualified fire victim, for us to determine the scope and nature of what your claims are. And many times it's multiple claims, but quite often the two most common type of claims are property damage, emotional distress. You might not have been running a business, you might not have personal injury, that type of thing. And then you're going to have to make a claim. And how that's normally done with the Eaton and Hearst fires is you're going to have to file a lawsuit. So the lawsuit's going to get filed, for instance, in the Eaton in Los Angeles County, and in Hearst it's going to be, I believe that's in Ventura County. These particular lawsuits are all going to be combined into what we call a complex litigation. Typically what happens is that I don't think they're going to be able to dispute liability. Then it becomes an issue of damages. And often what they do is then to establish a protocol through mediation or another process to quantify what those are and then work out a protocol for their payment. I have a personal belief that Southern California Edison is going to be so overwhelmed, like Pacific Gas and Electric was as a result of the campfire and all of the other fires that were up there, that they may have to resort to bankruptcy, and then that will change the process. So that's basically what if anybody contacts us, we would discuss with them.
Luckily, Jeff and I have been practicing in bankruptcy law and bankruptcy courts in Southern California for our combined experience is more than 50 years.
So how can Pacific Wildfire attorneys help victims with their insurance claims and disputes? What services are you providing?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Once you have an attorney that's helping you with the claim, insurance company's probably going to come at you a lot more correct than they were beforehand. They're going to give the full, or they're more likely to give the full amount of a certain claim instead of trying to minimize your claim as much as possible. I mean, at the end of the day, insurance companies are, they're $1 billion industry. They didn't become that way by paying out every claim that someone submits. They typically will dispute it or minimize it and come back with an amount and make you feel like you don't have the power to negotiate for a higher sum. And so that's really where having an attorney on your side, a knowledgeable attorney, which we are here at Pacific Wildfire Attorneys, we will help you maximize your claim as much as possible and cut through the disputes and let you know what is covered, what is not covered, and let you know where you should push harder, let you know where you should back off.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the Pacific wildfires. What sets Pacific Wildfire Attorneys apart from other attorneys who might be claiming to provide services in this area?
Well, not only are we very knowledgeable and experienced with these types of claims, we also have a very hands-on approach. You're going to be working with an attorney throughout the entire history of your claim, throughout the entire case. So we provide a much more personalized experience than firms that are processing, thousands of claims at the same time.
One of the things that's important is there's many different law firms that seek to represent wildfire claimants, but not all of those can give you the personalized attention that we will. Many times it's just kind of a numbers game about bringing in the client, and then the client is passed on to staff members. We will stay involved through the entire claims process from beginning to end.
Another thing that sets Pacific Wildfire Attorneys apart is that we are very conscious of how the recovery is going to look for our clients at the end of a case, at the end of a claim. We're not going to spend unnecessary money or exceed the costs that are reasonable in these types of situations. So at the end of the day, our focus is getting our client the most amount that they possibly can.